Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, thank you, I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. Some may know, some may not, that today is Medicaid's birthday. And I thought it was probably a good time to our anniversary, whatever you want to call it. But I came down here to reconnect to a discussion that I was having with my colleagues and with the White House on some of the concerns I have with the provisions in the bill that we packaged that was called the Big Beautiful Bill. That's actually not a marketing term. That's literally what the name of the bill is. First, I have to stipulate that there are aspects of this bill that I would love to vote on 10 times. For example, the tax reform. The tax portions of this bill were something I worked very hard as a member of the Finance Committee to get passed back in 2017. And what we did there was to avoid the single largest tax increase in U.S. history. And for those who said it was tax breaks to billionaires and corporations, probably ought to read the language or have somebody who has to explain it better. The tax reform measures help people that grew up like I did first and foremost. Go to that trailer park that I lived in on Richards Road in Antioch, Tennessee, just south of downtown Nashville, or the one that I lived in Jacksonville, Florida, and ask them what happens when you overtax businesses to their jobs. I could get into a lot of other discussions, but the bottom line is I didn't have a problem with the tax provisions. I actually wish that that had been the content of the first bill, and that we took the time to get the Medicaid policy right. But I'm back here again to talk about the Medicaid policy because we have to get it right. One of the reasons why I decided to resign when I was confronted with the challenge of opposing this bill, and I should say retire, not resign, I'm still here, was to make the point that getting this policy right is more important than me getting reelected. That I think that the Medicaid policy in this bill is so fundamentally flawed if we don't correct it, that my colleagues, red state or blue state Republicans, purple state Republicans, and red state Republicans may end up being guilty of almost the identical mistake that Barack Obama made when he forced Obamacare down our throats without seeking a single Republican vote to get policy that made sense. I was so convinced that Obama was wrong that I quit my job and worked full-time to get the North Carolina legislature ready for only being in the majority for the second time since the Civil War. I was so convinced the policy was going to be wrong a year before it got implemented. The Democrats overreached, and I became the second Republican Speaker of the House in North Carolina since the Civil War, based on a bad health care decision. The policy that the House sent us in the reconciliation bill was good policy for Medicaid. It had a work requirement, which I support. It had all kinds of policies for waste, fraud, and abuse that made sense, and it saved $100 billion over 10 years. But then somebody in the White House tried to convince the Senate that they should up the ante for $200 billion more in revenue to pass policy that will have, I think, irreparable damage, not only in the policy, but the politics. But we have time to fix it. And the reason I came to the floor today on the birthday of Medicaid, Mr. President, is to say I believe the President does not want to harm qualified beneficiaries of Medicaid. This bill will, in its current form. There's a way to fix it. There's a way to have President Trump's legacy on delivering on his promise to not push people off of Medicaid and government support systems who qualify for it. I'm not talking about the ones that probably shouldn't be on it. There's a way to fix it. But if we don't fix it, I believe that our president's legacy, President Trump, who I've supported in each one of his election efforts, I support to this day, his legacy is at risk if we don't recognize we're done and we move on to the next thing. We don't have to touch a line of the tax policy. We could have a discussion about some of the renewable energy, but I'm not going to have that discussion. I want to have discussion about something that I believe could be Republicans' Obamacare. Now, there are some states who probably are not affected substantially, but the majority are. And I believe if we come together and work on this policy and also work on the policy that's set to expire at the end of September, and that's some of the subsidies for the health care exchanges for Obamacare, we can get this right, and this president's legacy will be righting the mistake that was made by Obama and avoiding the mistake that his advisors have told him he should pursue. And so I want the President of the United States, my colleagues in the Senate body, to know I am unbridled by any political considerations for the next 17 months. And I stand ready to work with my Republican colleagues and Democrats who are willing to be bipartisan and do something right for a health care policy here to get this right. And if I do nothing else in my remaining 17 months, that's worth the effort. Thank you, Mr. President. Oh, and Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to waive the mandatory quorum call with respect to the Kent nomination.
Without objection.